stay on track as much as possible. This is a very somber occasion, so everybody's presence is greatly appreciated. We will have the names of the victims, and then we will invite speakers one by one. I did want to let our esteemed speakers know that should there be a congressperson or staff member that is able to make time from their busy schedule to attend our event, we may interrupt you for a minute or so so that they can share their thoughts and words of support. So thank you everyone for coming. So the reason we are here today is because yet again our community, the Hindu community of the world, has been hit with the reality of terrorism that can threaten our lives any day. In the wake of the Pahalgam terrorist attack that happened on April 22nd, 2025, there is a need for mobilization and for our community and our friends to speak up. We are thankful to the Global Kashmiri Pandit Diaspora and the Kashmir Overseas Association of USA for joining Hindu Action in co-hosting this event. We are also deeply humbled by the presence of members from Hindu American Foundation and the Coalition of Hindus of North America for joining us in briefing the members of Congress, as well as Sikhs for America. Thank you. I will ask everyone to stand briefly for a moment of silence in remembrance of the victims. Thank you, everyone. From this terrorist attack, may we remember them. And I know that this is something that we probably have to discipline ourselves to do. We cannot remember all 26 of them all the time, but remember one and tell their story whenever you can. Sushil Nathaniel, Hemant Suhas Joshi, Syed Adil, Atul Shrikant Moni, Lieutenant Vinay Narwal, Neeraj Udwani, Bitan Odhikari, Shudeep Nyobane, Shubham Dwivedi, Prashant Satpathy, Manish Ranjan, N. Ramachandran, Sanjay Lakshman Dele, Dinesh Agarwal, Samir Koha, Dilip Disle, J. S. Chandramouli, Samisati Madhusudan, Santosh Jagdale, Manjunath Rao, Bharat Bhushan, Kaustav Ganbote, Yatish Parmar, Sumit Parmar, Tage Hailiang, and Sailesh Kagathia. Om Shanti. We are here in remembrance, in solidarity, and also in defiance. I'd like to just recite a small shloka from the Bhagavad Gita, and please pardon my mispronunciations. I've just started reading the Bhagavad Gita a few years ago, and so This is, as I said, remembrance and defiance. Na jayate mriyate va kadachin, nayam bhutva bhavitava na bhuya. Aju nitya shashvato yam purano, nahanyate hanyamani sharire. Our soul is not born. It does not die at any time. Having once existed, we will be forever immortal, eternal. And when the body is gone, the soul remains. With that, I would like to introduce our first speaker, who will be appearing to us via a recording. His name is Sushant Sareen. He is a counter-terrorism expert, senior research fellow at the Observer Research Foundation, or ORF. He is among the top experts of Pakistan and its history of proxy war strategies. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Sushant Sareen. I'm a senior fellow at India's premier think tank, the Observer Research Foundation. India and Pakistan are on the brink of another war, and the current crisis has, the catalyst of the current crisis was the brutal and savage killing of 26 Hindu tourists in Kashmir, in a meadow in Kashmir, a popular tourist destination. And since then, tensions have ramped up because India, which has been facing relentless terrorism, export of terrorism from Pakistan, the cup of India's patience is full, it's brimming over. And there have been indications in the past that India is no longer ready to show any kind of a restraint, which everybody counsels, because while everybody around the world, the Western countries in particular, but also other countries, are quick to counsel restraint on India, none of them are either willing to call out the perpetrators of these kind of heinous killings in India, nor are they willing to take any solid action which will disincentivize or penalize countries which sponsor terrorism in other countries. And Pakistan has been notorious for it since the 1990s. Fingerprints of the Pakistani intelligence agencies and jihadist groups in Pakistan have been found in virtually every terror incident which has taken place anywhere in the world, from Morocco to the Philippines. And quite clearly, India has faced the brunt of it, and now India has reached the end of its tether. So clearly, we are walking the knife's edge right now in this region, and the anger in India is of a nature that I don't think anybody can really control. Now, the fundamental issue is that the Pakistanis, far from being contrite, are in denial. What they are trying to do is what they've always done, which is that initially deny and say that they had nothing to do with it, and in fact go a step further and claim that it was a false flag attack, which means that the Indians use some sneaky trick to massacre other Indians to blame Pakistan, so that Pakistan, which otherwise has a fabulous image in the world, and its people are most welcomed and its passport is the most popular passport in the world, we besmirch Pakistan's image. And to do that, we kill our own civilians, we destroy iconic hotels in Mumbai, etc., etc. And this has been a standard Pakistani procedure. So first is deny and then try and blame the victim for the attack on the victim. Then the effort is always to try and defy and the defiance comes from this thing that fine, we are a nuclear power, and the moment India tries to do something, we will launch off our nuclear weapons. And this is not just a threat to India. This is actually a threat to the world, because if you read Pakistani literature, the Pakistanis say that look, if we attack India, India will attack us, and then this whole world, the nuclear exchange between India and Pakistan is going to create problems for the entire globe. So, we hold, literally, we are in a position to do a nuclear blackmail to the rest of the world, because the kind of dust clouds that will be thrown up in the event of a nuclear exchange, or there are some people who claim that it could start even impact on the Earth's axis. Now, I'm not a technical person, so I can't vouch for that. But this is the Pakistani logic that not only they can hold India to blackmail, but they can hold the world to their nuclear blackmail. And clearly, I think any country which responds in such a cavalier manner or such an irresponsible manner that they waive the nuclear threat at the very first instance. And this is not people on the street or screaming anchors on television studios who are saying this kind of stuff. This is diplomats who are giving interviews. These are politicians, and these are mostly retired Pakistan military personnel who should probably know better on what the Pakistan military's policy has been, because Pakistan at the end of the day is a state which is run by the military, it's owned by the military, it's a militarized state, it is a state of the Pakistan army. The civilian government counts for nothing in that country. So I think it is critical that people understand the kind of nuclear blackmail which is being used, and I would imagine it's the world's responsibility, because the threat is to the world. I would imagine it's the world's responsibility to actually start taking action on this particular matter. The second and more critical issue, or equally critical issue, is the issue of Islamic terrorism that emanates out of Pakistan. Now, Pakistan has been put under pressure. It has come under scrutiny, FATF, many other such organizations. And what has happened is that every time the screws have been turned on Pakistan, there has been a certain cost attached to Pakistan's action. People have forced Pakistan to start cleaning up its act. The Pakistanis do make at least a show of an effort to do it. The latest such instance was the Financial Action Task Force, the FATF, which had put Pakistan in the grey list and forced Pakistan over about 2 years or so to clean up its this anti-money laundering and terror finance systems so that these could be curbed. Now, the problem with that was that the Americans, of course, took the lead in that, and most other countries went along, and the fact that the Pakistanis were forced to, for example, arrest a terrorist who was involved and seen as a mastermind for the attacks in Mumbai in 2008, when over 160 people were killed, butchered, I should say, by Pakistani terrorists. So this man, Sajid Mir, Pakistan was forced to finally come clean on the guy. Now the Pakistanis were playing a completely duplicitous game with the international community. Incidentally, this fellow Sajid Mir, who is a top leader of the Lashkar-e-Taiba, the same organization whose front organization, the resistance force, was responsible for the massacre, the recent massacre in Kashmir. This guy was, first the Pakistanis pretended they didn't know who he is. Then they said that nobody by this name exists. Then they said, well, there would be a Sajid Mir, but there is no Sajid Mir in the Lashkar-e-Taiba / Jamaat-ul-Dawa. Then they said, okay, fine, we found out that there is somebody like this, but we don't know where he is. Then they said that we've tried to find his whereabouts, but we believe that he's dead. Then they said we've also discovered his grave. They even brought out DNA samples from the grave to prove that the dead body in that grave is of Sajid Mir. But finally, when the FATF did not relent, Sajid Mir suddenly re-emerged, alive and well. He was tried in a court of law, and within 1 week, he was punished. And that does not say that the Pakistani criminal justice system is very fast, but that this was a sham trial. So they put some charges on him. Within 1 week, this case was settled. Man was sentenced to 7 or 10 or 15, I don't remember, some years in prison, and that was the end of the matter. Now nobody knows which prison he is in, what the charges exactly were against him, what the case files are, nothing. There's absolutely nothing available. So this is the kind of eyewash action that Pakistan takes, and it is allowed to take this action because the international community has turned a blind eye to what Pakistan has been doing. And one of the reasons for that is, I would imagine, an intellectual failure especially in the Western countries, to understand the phenomena of radical Islam. Now, there's been a lot of scholarship in the West to understand radical Islam and its use by states and by para-state organizations. So while there is that scholarship, I think that there is very little understanding of what exactly this phenomena means for the Western societies and other societies like India, and perhaps even China, probably much of the non-Islamic world. What this means, what this death cult, which has now taken root in Islamic societies, what it portends for societies around the world, especially for Western societies, which are seen as one of the biggest enemies of Islam. And this is, I'm not saying this, this is preachers, Islamic preachers in these countries who say this all the time. And I suspect the problem in the West is political correctness. Honestly speaking, after 9/11, there was a golden opportunity to end this menace once and for all. And by end this menace, I don't mean fight against Islam. What my thinking process is that the fight has to be against the kind of radicalism that has come in Islam. But the way the West approached it, and I blame the West because the West dominates the market of ideas. The West is the place from where the international narratives are generated and made. And if in the West there was a certain kind of self-loathing, number one, number two, there was a certain kind of apologism or guilt even about what Islamic society or what was happening in Islamic societies, or what some of these radical Islamist groups were doing. And there was this apologism for Islam. It was almost as though if we are hitting out at radical Islam, then we might actually be hurting Islamic societies, hurting their sentiments. So a very, very long rope was given. Yes, law and order organizations, law enforcement agencies would act against terrorists or potential terrorists, but those were isolated incidents. It wasn't part of a larger national and international policy where an international coalition was to go after this ideology, because at the end of the day, this is an ideological fight. And I'm afraid the West has failed it. So today, the West can very easily turn around, as many countries are doing, and say that, well, the West does not have a dog in the fight between India and Pakistan, so, well, India and Pakistan can sort it out, as President Trump said that, they've been doing this for 1500 years, and we don't really need to intervene in this. Fine. But remember one thing, that this is not just India's fight. This is something which is going to come back and bite the United States and its other Western allies. in not too distant a future, the same kind of a blackmail to which we are being subjected today will also be used against the United States and other countries. That's a no-brainer. It's simply a matter of time. Wait till Iran gets a nuclear bomb, wait till some of the other countries get a nuclear bomb, and God forbid, a parastate organization manages to lay its hand on nuclear technology, which isn't quite rocket science, if you ask me. And they can manage it. It's probably difficult right now, but it's not impossible. And I would imagine that the attention of the world should focus on, apart from the larger strategic challenges of the rise of China, certainly that has to be a matter of primary focus. But that does not mean that this very insidious kind of a threat, this very potent threat, is ignored. Also because if the United States is going to be a global power, then it is critical that the United States is not targeted around the globe. And the fact of the matter is that with the growing power of many of these Islamist groups, and let's not kid ourselves, many of these radical Islamist groups have gained power over the last 10-15 years. If these groups gain power, they will attack Western, especially American targets around the world, which means that American citizens are not going to be safe around the world. Now, the US can turn around and say that, well, we will go and we'll bomb the hell out of any of these places, but for how long will you do it without allies? And allies will come if a common cause is made to get rid of this problem. So yes, Pahalgam is India's fight. Yes, India will fight it the way India deems fit. Yes, India is not going to listen to preachers from the West who are talking about exercising restraint, because the cup of our patience has run us over. But I think it is extremely critical for the West also to realize, especially the United States, which remains the leading country in the world, that this is a crisis not just of India, this is a crisis which is going to hit the world going forward.
At this time, before we move on to our second speaker, I would like to introduce Congressman Sri Thanedar from Michigan to share his thoughts in the light of the Pahalgam tragedy.
Well, good afternoon. How is everybody? Good. All right, good.
Sad.
I know, it's sad. Sad and what else? Angry and frustrated. And something we can't stand it now. You know, we can't stand it. This is not an isolated incident, right? We've seen this all along. We've seen attacks on Hindu temples. 24 of the Hindu temples in the United States have been attacked, right? We have seen SB 403 that was targeted towards the Hindus. We have seen attacks in Bangladesh. You know, Bangladesh atrocities are going on for decades now. Decades. You know, abducting Hindu girls, you know, mistreating, abusing. There is just so much going on, and there's a ton of Hindu hate and Hindu attacks in Pakistan. So this is by no means an isolated incident. What happened in Pahalgam, atrocities that happened, this goes just beyond usual terrorism. You know, you see terrorists come and attack indiscriminately to human beings. They just want to create fear, terror. But this was not the usual terrorist attack that you would normally see. What this was directed, an attack, measured, planned, calculated, directed at the Hindu community. These perpetrators who came and asked people's religion, they asked them to quote certain verses. They even asked them to take their pants down. simply to find out what religion these people belong to. And when they saw that these were Hindus, they were murdered. And these horrible, inhuman people, they took selfies with the dead Hindus. That is the type of people we are dealing with. You know, and when I became the United States Congress, I saw that there is nothing about Hinduism in the United States Congress. So one of the first acts that I did as a US congressman was to form the Hindu, Buddhist, Jain, and Sikh caucus in the United States Congress. And the purpose was to educate members of Congress. Now look, Hindu community practices its religion in a very peaceful manner. The Hindu religion is a very all-inclusive, very accepting religion, and Hindus practice their faith passively, quietly, and peacefully. Hindus aren't meant to be, the religion doesn't teach them to be aggressive. The religion teaches them to be all-inclusive. And a lot of times, some people look at this peacefulness, this quietness, this non-passive way of practicing our religion as a sign of weakness. And through that sign of weakness, Hindus get attacked all over the world. And that needs to stop. And that's why I am a strong voice in the United States Congress, being very pro-Hindu, very pro-India, very pro-Bharat. Very pro-Bharat is what I do here in Congress, because Hindu Americans have contributed so much to this country, so much to our success, whether it is in space, whether it is in technology, whether it is in business or in academia. Hindus have done remarkable, and they have contributed to the growth, the success, economic success of the United States. At the same time, Hindus are not organized as a group. You know, many other organizations, many other communities, you see a lot more organizations. Hindus haven't been politically active often. That is one of the way of life for Hindus. They do their things, they do their karma, and they aren't politically active, they are not aggressive people. They want to do good karma, help others in very much. But time has now come for Hindus to unite. Time has now come for Hindus to grow a political muscle, so that we can stand strongly when such atrocities happen. This particular atrocities, the Kashmir attack, happened while a sitting United States Vice President, J.D. Vance, right? He was there in India. Look at the daring of these people, how they dared to attack Indians in India, innocent travelers, tourists in India, while a visiting US Vice President was in India.
They're trying to send a message.
They're trying to send a message. Now, what does America needs to do? America needs to send them a message.
Yes! Thank you.
And that message isn't what the message J.D. Vance said. J.D. Vance said he was sorry about the event, he's heartbroken about the event, and then he's asked India to cool it down. Cool it down? At a time when 27 of India's citizens were killed in cold blood by this barbaric, inhuman terrorist? This is not time to cool it down. And that's not the message America needs to send it to these terrorists. This is not the message America needs to send it to Lakshar Taiba. This is not the message America needs to send it to the front, whatever front they call themselves as. This is not the message. The message really is that we are going to hunt every terrorist who did these atrocities. We must hunt every terrorist, no matter what it takes, no matter where you need to go, to ensure that they are punished, that they are caught, that they are eliminated. They need to be eliminated. We need to focus on eliminating terrorism all across the world. We need to focus on terrorism. It is not the time to cool it. This is not the time to protect those who are protecting the terrorist. Right? This is not the time. There needs to be an investigation. We have seen indications who supported this terrorist. We have information and indication about which country is supporting these terrorists. That needs to be investigated. America needs to partner with India to investigate these crimes, investigate those who support it. And if those who are supporting this crime happen to be a state, like a country, that country needs to be punished. That country needs to be punished with economic sanctions. That country needs to be punished with actions and strong actions so that they won't dare to support another terrorist attack anywhere on the world. So that's really my message to the United States administration, that we not going to cool it, we shouldn't be cooling it, India shouldn't be cooling this. This needs to be investigated. These perpetrators needs to be punished and eliminated, and that needs to be the focus. That needs to be in the same way as Israel is fighting hard against the terrorists. Israel is fighting hard against the terrorists, and India has every right to exercise all available means to address these atrocities. And I urge the Indian government to find these people, punish them, and continue to show a strong approach towards this so such atrocities will not be happening again. My name is Congressman Shri Thanedar. I'm proud to represent Michigan. I'm the first Indian American congressperson from the state of Michigan. And I am just happy to be here in Congress serving my community, bringing federal dollars to Detroit and working, creating jobs and creating economic prosperity in my district of Detroit, which has suffered a lot. So, but I continue to remain a friend of the Hindus. I was raised as a Hindu, and I continue to remain a friend of the Hindu community. Thank you all for your passion. Thank you all for your activism. We need to continue to stay united, continue to stay together, and we need to continue to fight. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Congressman Shri Thanedar. That was a very powerful message and a call to action to our current administration. We hope that our administration is listening, because now more than ever, India and the world needs a strong unity to combat terrorism. So our next speaker is Michael Rubin. Michael is a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. A former Pentagon official, Dr. Rubin has lived in post-revolution Iran, Yemen, and both pre- and post-war Iraq. He also spent time with the Taliban before 9/11. For more than a decade, he has taught classes at sea about the Horn of Africa, Middle East, conflicts, culture, and terrorism to deployed U.S. Navy and Marine units. Please welcome Dr. Michael Rubin.
Thank you so much. Look, what happened on April 22nd was no accident, and it shouldn't be forgiven. President Donald Trump responded with moral equivalence, and that was wrong. There is no moral equivalence when it comes to terrorism. There is no shade of gray. It is a black and white issue. When it comes time to convincing this administration that what happened in Kashmir is also an American interest, it's important to remember that Americans also died at Lashkar-e-Taiba hands in Mumbai in 2008. And when you track the number of Pakistani funerals that coincided with the end of the fight in Afghanistan, there is absolutely no question that Pakistan was involved in the deaths of dozens, if not hundreds, of Americans. When you consider that in Afghanistan, all of the fertilizer precursors, I'm sorry, not all, 90% of the fertilizer precursors used in Taliban improvised explosive devices, 90% of them came from one of two different Pakistani factories. This notion that the Inter-Services Intelligence Agency didn't know what was going on is absolute nonsense. Another reason why this is important, and the congressman referred to this in a different way, is we already see the beginnings of ISI terrorism in the United States itself. That's what the Khalistan movement is about, and we need to recognize that it's not an organic indigenous movement, that it is directed out of Pindi and Islamabad. Now, what I worry about when it comes to the immediate reaction that we see both in the United States, but also to some extent in India, is that self-deterrence is as much of a green light as Asim Munir's jugular speech in the days before. When you self-deter, it convinces the aggressors that they can quite literally get away with murder. It doesn't lead them to pull back and become less aggressive. It encourages them to benefit more from terrorism. Now, I'm a historian by training, and two instances come to mind that involve the United States, which I think India could derive inspiration from now. I'll do this a little bit achronologically. In 1990, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, and George H.W. Bush was unsure initially how he was going to react. After all, Iraq had the 5th largest army in the world. Talk about self-deterrence. There was a real belief that they also had chemical weapons and so forth. And Margaret Thatcher, who had a personal relationship with George H.W. Bush, called up George H.W. Bush and said quite publicly, "Don't go wobbly on me now, George." Now the relationship, the personal relationship between Prime Minister Modi and President Trump is even tighter than what we saw between Margaret Thatcher and George H.W. Bush. What we need is Prime Minister Modi not to simply call once, but to call repeatedly, and maybe not publicly, but give the message, "Don't go wobbly on me now, Don." There's absolutely no excuse for the United States not to stand up for its top allies and the world's largest democracy. Now, going back in time to 1988, we all remember the Lockerbie bombing. It was a precursor to what we saw with regard to the 1985 Air India bombing. Now, not a precursor, a postcursor. Yeah, this is why I didn't become an English teacher. At any rate, well, first of all, there you have another example of how Pakistan-based terror has a habit of impacting the United States. Expect that article in the next couple days now that I realize it. Now, at any rate, after 1988, the President of the United States was Ronald Reagan, but George H.W. Bush, his vice president, had just been elected. And Ronald Reagan, we know from the declassified documents, basically said, "In my last days in office, I'm not going to tell you what to do. You're going to be president. You decide." And what George H.W. Bush decided was, rather than treat the Lockerbie bombing, terrorism, as a military matter, he was going to try to treat it as a diplomatic and a judicial matter, to ramp up sanctions against, in this case, Libya, as well as to put together the forensic evidence. The problem with that is, if you consider terrorism to be a judicial matter rather than a military matter, you're always looking to pick up the pieces after the attack. The second problem with that is the momentum and the outrage in the international community that would allow for retaliation dissipates with time. And so if you mull options for too long, you actually enable the perpetrators of terrorism to get away with it. And for years, Muammar Gaddafi was able to remain in power. Now, of course, Muammar Gaddafi fell out of power in 2011. He should have fallen out of power in 1988, after the Lockerbie attack. Now, so Modi must call President Trump repeatedly. There will be some military, there's valid military response, and I'll get into that in a second. But the response shouldn't only be military. If people say, well, we don't want a military response, we're afraid, we'll get them to sign on immediately to some of the other responses. Why, for example, on May 9th, is the International Monetary Fund going to be meeting to approve a $1 billion loan to Pakistan, the 25th multi-billion dollar loan? And this comes after March, when Pakistan was given a $1.3 billion loan. Now ask yourself this: if Pakistan needs this $1 billion, is the apparatus of Pakistan's security state and the ISI, does that cost more than $1 billion? The answer is yes. And if that's the case, if Pakistan's nuclear program costs more than $1 billion, and if money is fungible, does Pakistan really need the $1 billion, or is it simply bailing out terrorism after the fact? Now, there's no reason why, objectively speaking, Pakistan should not be designated a state sponsor of terror. Now, I've been on the receiving end of Pakistan's complaints about this, how Pakistanis will always complain that we treat them like a fair weather friend, that we're always sanctioning them when we don't need them, and then we lift sanctions when suddenly the Soviet Union invades Afghanistan, or we have 9/11 and so forth, and we need Pakistan. You know what? We do treat them like a fair weather friend. But the response to that is simply not to be their friend, that we shouldn't be lifting the sanctions, which by any objective measure are deserved. But I wouldn't simply stop with designating Pakistan as a state sponsor of terror. I would designate the ISI as a terror group. And there's already a precedent here when it comes to President Donald Trump and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Again, Trump, who admittedly doesn't know the history of the region, and when he's surprised by a question, he is going to utter this inane moral equivalence. But if Prime Minister Modi will confront Trump politely with his own precedents, then there's absolutely no reason not to designate the ISI to be a terrorist group. Let me just conclude with a couple other options. Of course, terrorism, I worked in the George W. Bush administration, and the problem with George W. Bush's so-called global war on terrorism is that terrorism is a tactic. It's not an ideology, and it's an ideology which drives the ISI. When it comes to terrorism, the calculation behind the tactic is simple. It's a cost-benefit analysis. Do we gain more from conducting these acts of terrorism than we lose in terms of the retaliation? And therefore, the key to countering terrorism is to raise the cost to that terrorism. So I would ask you, if the ports of Hodeidah and Bandar Abbas can go boom in the night, why can't the port of Gwadar or Karachi? It doesn't need to have a claim of responsibility to it. And when it comes to Gwadar, let's also not kid ourselves. Pakistan is not really an independent state anymore. It's a satrapy of China. And China has been encouraging Pakistan, China has been encouraging Bangladesh, and trying to encircle India. In addition, let me just conclude with some advice to Asim Munir. You saw what happened to Qasem Soleimani. What I would say, not only to Asim Munir, but actually to his aides, is that no one should get into a car with him right now. no one should get within 30 meters of his car. If you do, you're taking your own life into your own hands. That, rather than moral equivalence, should be the theme of the US response when it comes to what happened in Kashmir. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rubin. That was very, very powerful and definitely a lot of advice that I hope that our administrations in America and in India will pay heed to. We are delighted to have our next speaker or presentation from Dr. Raji. Oh, all right. Sorry about that. So our next speaker is Cliff Smith. Cliff Smith is a Government Affairs Director with the North American Values Institute. Please welcome Cliff Smith.
Nice to meet you. I feel like I have a very tough act to follow with both Congressman Theander and Mr. Rubin. Michael Rubin is an old colleague of mine, so I feel like it's going to be tricky to surpass him. That said, perhaps I picked my topic fortuitously because I want to sort of take it back a step. Here's how I'll start this. No person with a conscience can be anything but horrified by the Halagam terrorist attack that killed 26 innocent tourists in the Kashmir Valley. It is perhaps even more horrifying that it is known as being a peaceful area, and it was the first major terrorist attack since the Pulwama attack of 2019 that killed 40 people, and that's the first major terrorist attack since the repeal of 370 and the incorporation of Kashmir fully into India. Clearly, unlike many of you, I am not a native of Kashmir. However, unlike most Americans, I have actually visited the Kashmir Valley. I have walked the streets of Srinagar. I have boated on Dal Lake. I've seen the beautiful agricultural lands in Budgam. I have met with Kashmiri Pandits trying to re-enter the life in Kashmir. And I've even joined Kashmiri Muslims at the Hazrat Bal Mosque during prayers. While I'm by no means an expert in Kashmiri culture or history, I'd like to think that seeing the conflict up close, seeing the valley for myself, talking to people involved, both Hindu and Muslim, and watching the propaganda put out by Pakistani supporting groups in the US has led me to have a few intelligent comments. So this is kind of taking a step back over things that Michael Rubin and the Congressman said. Let me start with some recent news that I'm sure you guys are all familiar with. Right before the attack, the chief of the Pakistani army, Asim Munir, gave a speech that, while provocative, actually inadvertently explained a lot about what's going on. Let me quote directly from his speech. "We are different from the Hindus in every possible aspect of life. Our religion is different, our customs are different, our traditions are different, our thoughts are different, our ambitions are different. It is the foundation of the two-nation theory that was led there, that we are two nations, we are not one nation. Because of that, our forefathers mounted this incessant struggle to create this country." He goes on to say, "My dear brothers and sisters and sons and daughters, please don't forget the story of Pakistan and don't forget to narrate the story of Pakistan for the next generation." Indeed, while I disagree with the premise and the conclusion of his speech, I cannot help but admire the clarity of his speech. It says a great deal about the conflict in Kashmir and why, nearly 80 years later, it continues. Let me say something everyone in this room certainly knows. When the British Raj was coming to an end and India was at long last gaining independence, partition was not inevitable. Jinnah, the father of Pakistan, pushed forward against the wishes of leaders like Gandhi and Nehru, India believed that it could create a country that encompassed both Hindus and Muslims and give equal rights to all, even while having a Hindu majority. Thus, two nations were born with two very different DNAs. While India has a clear Hindu majority, it was born out of the idea that Hindus and Muslims were not, as Munir claimed, different in every possible aspect of life. His statement, however, accurately depicts the Pakistani concept of nationhood. One need only look at the demographic decline of Pakistani Hindus over the decades, while India's Muslim population has stayed relatively stable, to understand these differences are not superficial. And it is not Maharaja Hari Singh's decision to sign with India, not Kashmir's Muslim majority, nor any other event that has created and sustained the Kashmir conflict. It is the concept of nationhood by the Pakistani military and those in charge in Pakistan. To them, Kashmir being a Muslim majority area is part of Pakistan already. It is their very concept of nationhood that would make this inevitable. And to India, and notice I don't say to Hindus only, the opposite is true. Let me quote former Indian Minister of External Affairs Salman Khurshid, a Muslim, speaking in opposition to Pakistan's claim on Kashmir. If religion is used as a carving knife to redesign politics, virtually the whole world will have to ready itself for the chisel. In other words, while Khurshid, a Muslim living in Hindu-majority India, he recognizes there is more to civic life and politics than religion alone, and that claims of nationhood by religion alone would destroy any concept of freedom, equality, or mutual respect. Given this, so long as Pakistan holds to its ideology of religion being the dividing line, and India holds true to its belief that different religions can carry on with mutual respect, the conflict in Kashmir will continue. Perhaps it is just as interesting that Munir's invitation to not forget the story and to teach it to the children. Indeed, it is precisely this that I was involved with that got me involved in these affairs in the first place. Myself and some former colleagues started noticing that certain Islamist groups in America, purportedly speaking for American Muslims, but rarely doing so, were in fact front organizations for groups like Jamaat-e-Islami. Particularly after the repeal of 370, these groups went into overdrive to keep the story of Pakistan and of the Kashmir conflict in front of the US government and civil society with talks of genocide and other assorted propagandistic claims. They were not alone. Certain legacy groups stemming from Middle East Muslim Brotherhood, Turkey's various Islamist movements, were backing them, as was Wahhabist Qatar's various influence arms like Al Jazeera and Turkey's TRT News and many other influence operations. While Pakistani nationalism is not Islamist per se, indeed it would be a mistake to think that all supporters of Pakistan are Islamists. Islamism fits nicely into the Pakistani nationalist worldview. For years, these groups have tried to shape the narrative around Kashmir and Pakistan. And frankly, India and its supporters and American Hindus, and even friendly Indian Muslims, are far behind them in terms of influence. China, for its part, at times amplifies Islamism for its own purposes, even while persecuting Uyghur Muslims. In visiting the Kashmir Valley, I saw many things one might rightly criticize the Indian government for. But I saw absolutely nothing, heard absolutely nothing, and experienced absolutely nothing that would make the kind of propaganda India's foes pump out even remotely plausible, let alone convincing. People in the Kashmir Valley when I was there seemed happy and with the new investment in relative peace. Nobody seemed tense. People worshipped openly. Hindu, Christian, and other tourists mingled with little fanfare. In short, things were relatively normal for an area that had seen so much conflict. When you look at the Pahalgam attack, as horrifying as it is, it's really not much in terms of any sort of actual conquest of Kashmir. It's essentially nothing in those terms. But it does keep alive the narrative that Pakistan has not given up and will not give up. Historian Daniel Pipes, an old colleague of mine and a colleague of Michael's who just recently spoke, has observed, wars usually end when failure causes one side to despair, when that side has abandoned its war aims and accepted defeat, and when the defeat has exhausted their will to fight. Pipes uses this logic to apply to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. He's observed that while Palestinians could have had a state, too many Palestinian radicals, particularly but not exclusively jihadists like Hamas, repeatedly chose violent conflict with Israel rather than peace, because of their ideology of the whole British mandate of Palestine belonging to them is too deeply ingrained. And too many well-meaning efforts to help achieve peace have made them think that total victory is within their grasp. The only solution to this is to make the Palestinians, in Pipes' view, realize that their goal of ending Israel is futile, that they give up and choose to direct their energies elsewhere. This logic, however, is not unique to the Israel-Palestine conflict. Indeed, Putin's argument for a conquest of Ruski Mir, the Russian world, a post-Cold War concept which includes multiple other countries, is a central component of why the war in Ukraine continues as we speak, and all the international fallout it entails. So long as Putin believes he can win, he will continue. Pakistan is not significantly different. The conflict is kept alive because Pakistan has not been given sufficient reason to believe that it will ultimately lose. It is kept alive by the support it gets from the international community. It is not always explicit, but it is implicit in treating their claims as legitimate and treating both sides as if they are equal in their claims, and a raft of other nations that can directly or tacitly support their claims. Turkey, Qatar, China, among others, tend to make them believe they can win. Indeed, India needs to convince Pakistan that it cannot win, that it will pay too heavy a price of continuing. Doing this need not be violent. Matter of fact, Michael Rubin pointed out to a very good thing, the IMF loan. That would pay a heavy price if they were not to get that. The treaty, the Indus Water Treaty that's going on right now, that's another great way of influencing Pakistan without direct violence. These kinds of things that make them pay a heavy price for their actions can be a part of a program trying to convince them that they cannot win and must end the conflict. In my view, India's policy should be aimed at a single goal, and that is just what I said, convincing Pakistan that they will not inevitably win this conflict. They have failed thus far, and anything that they do to continue the conflict will actually result in losses in the very thing they seek to accomplish. That will be India's victory, and ironically, Pakistan's too. It is only once Pakistan's obsession with Kashmir and with the supposed threat of India more broadly that it can become a successful nation. That, in turn, will be good not just for India, but for the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cliff. Our next speaker is Dr. Surinder Kaul, founder of Global Kashmiri Pandit Diaspora, or GKPD. GKPD is a civil society of Kashmiri Pandits all around the globe. Its mission is to create awareness about the genocide and ethnic cleansing of Kashmiri Hindus from their ancestral land of Kashmir. GKPD was the initiator, research partner, and logistic partner for the movie The Kashmir Files. Please welcome Dr. Surinder Kaul.
Thank you for a nice introduction. Well, on this somber occasion, it's very disturbing to speak, but thank you, Utsav-ji, Hindu Action, for coordinating this event, very important event. I'm glad to see Adapa Prasad-ji worked for decades, and Justice Singh-ji, Sat Sri Akal-ji, Suhag-ji from HAF, Nikun-ji doing an excellent job from Kona, and Upharji is his fellow Kashmiri Hindu who will be speaking after me. And my name is Surinder Kaul. I am based in Houston. I am a direct victim of this radical jihadi terrorism. My community belongs to Kashmir with a recorded history of 5,100 years. 5,100 years, 5,100 and plus one. This is 5,101st year of our existence. Our community, with such a nice tenets as Congressman Thanugar said, the tenets of our community of respect for all, spirituality, truthfulness, righteousness. And this whole community has witnessed a genocide and ethnic cleansing once every 100 years in last 800 years. Kashmir was a cradle of Indic civilization, as you all know. Kashmir was the fountainhead and the highest learning center in India at that time, where all people, not only from Bharat, even from Central Asia and Tibet were coming. It was the fountainhead of Buddhism. And both Hinduism and Buddhism flourished and reached out to Central Asia, Tibet, and other places. Kashmir was a place where lot of things about human creativity established. The Natya Shastra, the musicology that we see in Bharat, and the grammar, all originated from Kashmir. But nevertheless, we became the victims of genocide and ethnic cleansing in independent India. And this whole game of terrorism started, we all say 1990. No. It started 1988, 89, 90. And its final trailer came up on January 19th, 1990. So what happened that night? The whole mob came on the roads, and this minuscule population in Kashmir, 500,000 people, and not living in one place, spread out in thousands of miles in Kashmir, surrounded by thousands of jihadi and radicalized mindsets. You know, sometimes we are being asked, why did you leave? Why didn't you resist? And this attack on these 26 soul sons of Bharat is not attack on only these 26 sons of Bharat, their families, their extended families. This attack is on the idea of Bharat. This attack is on the diversity of Bharat. This attack is on the multiculturalism of Bharat. And this has been going on for the last 4 decades. We have witnessed attack on Indian Parliament. We have witnessed the brutal Mumbai carnage. We have witnessed Kargil fiasco. We have witnessed all sorts of massacres. I know this becomes very painful because it spread out that the victims were identified on the basis of their religion. We have seen in the last several massacres where in Kashmir, Hindus were telling, okay, Hindus be on this side, Muslims be on this side. But we need to understand this terrorism. It is spreading its tentacles all over the globe. It has become a global challenge, including the United States of America. It has become a monster, and it needs to be taken head on. The problem happens when we try to justify why somebody is doing terrorism. Some countries have this disease. Oh no, this country is doing terrorism because of something. This is propagating a very wrong narrative. We as Kashmiri Hindus, which is basically the image of the broader Hindu mindset, that inclusivity, living in harmony, we never reciprocated violence with these barbarians. We don't have a single recorded history of having a violence against them, despite what they did to us. But what happens? Nobody's listening. So this is a very big challenge. And I'm glad that HAF, KONA, Hindu Action, and larger diaspora organizations are working towards it. We all need to be making a concerted effort to take this monster and reach out where we could reach out. So basically, Global Kashmiri Pandit Diaspora did an extensive research about six years ago, because in the government numbers, they are saying that only 209 people of Kashmiri Hindus were killed. We did an extensive research, and we counted around 1,600 plus members have been martyred just because of the faith, including many Sikhs. Chhattisgarh massacre was primarily directed towards the Sikhs. So we also wanted to put a cost to all this what happened in Kashmir. And to our surprise, the cost came to around $3.5 billion of this loot, khasut, encroachment, vandalization, and $3.5 billion. So this is the height that we have gone through, but nevertheless, as other Hindus, we are professionals. We believe in pursuit of knowledge. We believe in serving mankind. And we have, despite the script of finishing our civilization, despite the script of finishing us off, despite the script of bringing us on the road, we are still here, serving mankind without any help. Because that knowledge, that pursuit of academics helped us. Had it been some other community, it would have been wiped out. But this is the community, we see lots of communities who have faced similar sort of thing, they become anti-India. Never, ever, even once. Despite successive governments in the past failed us, we talked about Bharat. We talked about unity of Bharat. We are thankful to US who opened the doors for us. And a great country, the same thing is happening here. But we also take our Bharat wherever we go. So that is the difference between us and between some others. So what I mean to say, that we need to be together, and we need to be reaching out to the congressmen, doing more and more of these congressional briefing. And one day, someday, we will be victorious, and all these radicalized mindsets, all these jihadi mindsets definitely will be defeated once for all. And see the element of jihadism. I know Clifford Smith made a reference to the speech of Chief of the Army Staff, General Munir. See the language that he was using. What did he say? He straightway said the difference between kafir and non-kafir. He was saying that you guys, they are kafir. We are superior. And I'm not surprised, because it looked like that Osama bin Laden was speaking in the garb of being a general of the Chief of the Army Staff. Not surprised, because he was there in the garrison city, and possibly he has preached, and this is what is reflecting out. We all need to know about it. So, my dear friends, it is a day where we all need to make a resolve to fight, to stay united. I was happy, we just before coming to this session, we had another session, and we had some interaction with the congressman, and we listened to the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, and we raised this question, and he showed that support. But we are looking forward to all the support that India needs to set forth the record straight once for all. With that, namaskar. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Surinder Kaul. Our next speaker is our esteemed guest, Jesse Singh. Jesse Singh is chairman of Sikhs of America. Thank you so much for coming. Please share your.
Good evening, namaskar, sat sri akal. Today we gather with heavy hearts and solemn minds to remember the 26 victims of this horrific attack that happened in Kashmir. They were not just numbers, they were sons, husbands, fathers, brothers. They were professionals, they were tourists. They were not just numbers. And it was those who say that terrorism does not have a religion were proven wrong, because this time they were asked about their religion, and when they said Hindus, they were shocked. The unfortunate thing is that similar thing, like Mr. Kaul reminded us, happened 25 years ago, when 36 Sikhs were targeted in Kashmir and killed because they were Sikhs. And we have not done much in these 25 years, and this thing happened with our Hindu brothers now. We need to stay united. We need to show the world that India is strong. We need to send a message to Munir that the false that you use to create a two-nation theory that you cannot live with Hindus is false, because today we have more Muslims in India living in India than in Pakistan. And one of the victims in the 26 was a local Kashmiri Muslim who grabbed the gun from these terrorists, these animals, and tried to save these innocent tourists. And he was also shot and killed. So that shows that Kashmiris, Muslims, everybody stands with India. And for the first time I saw in the streets of Srinagar, local Muslims condemning these heinous acts, standing with India, standing there with Indian flags, and they were on the side of India. So this has clearly, these animals who came and who did this, their aim was to create a rift between the minority communities. They were hoping that in India, Hindus will react and there will be riots in several cities and people will be killing each other, but that didn't happen. India has already won the first battle in this fight by showing unity and staying united. This is not the first time that India has faced this kind of situation, and this is not going to be the last. India has always come out of this situation strong and has always shown unity and resilience. The first terrorists were not there last week. The first terrorists came 500 years ago when Babur and Aurangzeb, they came to Kashmir and tried to do a similar thing. And people who are saying today that the Sikhs in India or the minorities in India will not stand with India right now, the Sikhs will not fight against terrorism, I want to tell you that Sikhs stood with Kashmiri Pandits, Sikhs stood with Kashmiri Hindus 500 years ago. Our Guru gave his life against terrorism, and Sikhs still to stand today with you, and we are together with India in this fight, because that's the foundation of our religion, that we stand against injustice, terrorism, and we'll always stand with our Kashmiri Hindu Pandit brothers. I would also like to, somehow put, pressure or request the U.S. administration that there's no difference between a Hamas terrorist and a Lashkar-e-Toiba terrorist. We need to have the same dosage, like Michael earlier said, we need to step up. The time has come to step up. Hafiz Saeed is still roaming around in Pakistan. We hear that he's been behind bars. He's been sentenced for 30 years, but recently all his pictures are surfacing. He's giving speeches. So we need to stay united. I assure my Hindu brothers that Sikhs are with you in this fight, have always been, and let us stay united and let us work together to fight against terrorism. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Upar Kotru, who is founder of the Kashmiri Overseas Association, USA. President of Kashmiri Overseas Association, USA.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak here today. I stand before you not only just a concerned US citizen, but also as a survivor, as Dr. Cole was mentioning about it. My name is Upahar Kotru, and I am a Kashmiri Hindu, also known as Kashmiri Pandits. I come from a community that thrived in Kashmir for over 5,000 years. A land where yoga, Ayurveda, the spiritual philosophies of Kashmiri Shaivism were born. These are the things that really shaped the very soul of Bharat and beyond. Tragically, over past 700 years, as was mentioned by other speakers, since the radical Islamic rulers took over the region, my community was brutally and systematically reduced to a small minority through a series of violence, persecution, and forced conversions, dwindling to less than 5% by 1900s. The winter of 1990, when my paradise was violently ripped apart. I was 10 years old when terror knocked on our doorsteps. Radical Islamic terrorists, fueled by hate, began chanting, "Convert, die, or leave." I watched as my relatives, my neighbors, people who I grew up with, were dragged from their homes, tortured, and brutally killed. Overnight, 500,000 Kashmiri Hindus, including my own family, had to leave our motherland. Our homes, our temples, our cultural identity, everything that we knew was destroyed. We were made refugees in our own country. The economic loss, Dr. Cole talked about it, that my community suffered is estimated to be billions of dollars in property, land, livelihood. But the true toll is beyond material. The cultural and human cost of genocide cannot be quantified. It was the destruction of civilization, the entire way of life that existed for millennia. To this day, 35 years later, my community lives in the refugee camps in Jammu, just less than 200 miles away from Kashmir. The threat from radical Islamists persists, preventing our rightful return. And the recent attack, the Pahalgam attack, is a proof, a chilling reminder that targeted killings of non-Muslims continues to happen in Kashmir by the same radical Islamist terrorists that butchered us. These tourists visiting Kashmir were targeted and executed simply for their faith. Non-Muslims were singled out, forced to recite Islamic verses, checked for circumcision, and slaughtered in cold blood. This supremacist jihadi mindset, this ideology, is not just confined to Kashmir. It has spread like a cancer across the globe. It struck America, 9/11. It struck Mumbai, 2008. It terrorized Israel on October 7. And at the epicenter of this violence, the heart of terror, is none other than Pakistan. Pakistan has long harbored, funded, and supported global terrorism. From Osama bin Laden to Hafiz Saeed to Masood Azhar, the list of terrorists sponsored and protected by Pakistan is long and unforgivable. Just this February, the leaders of Jaish-e-Mohammed, Lashkar-e-Taiba, and Hamas openly gathered in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir and discussed plans about how they're going to further their ideology and violent crime against the humanity. Pakistan is not just a bystander, it is an active participant, sponsor of terrorism. And it is time the world stopped pretending otherwise. And let me be clear, I do not speak from hate, I speak from pain. I feel for the suffering of others, including the majority Muslims who have suffered, who have been victims of this radicalization. I empathize with their grief. But I also yearn for their courage and not keeping silence when we are being hunted. True healing and reconciliation begins with acknowledgement and confronting the truth with honesty and courage. Genocide doesn't start with bullets. It starts from denial. It continues when we refuse to acknowledge the pain of the victims. And it thrives when nations like Pakistan are allowed to continue such acts without consequences. The world needs to understand that this isn't just an isolated tragedy. It is part of a larger, global, jihadi ideology of hate. The same forces that sought to destroy my people are the forces that threaten every democratic nation today. In every era, history calls upon the global community to unite against evil. This is such a moment. The United States must lead the charge in this fight. We must stand alongside India and all nations who oppose terrorism, hate, and violence. We must hold Pakistan accountable for fostering extremism. The next generation of children deserve a world where they can live free from terrorism, free from hatred. Let this be the moment when we say enough. Never again should we allow the forces of hatred to destroy the fabric of humanity. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that powerful speech. I would like to invite Suhak Shukla, Executive Director of Hindu American Foundation, a pioneering organization in the field of American Hindu advocacy.
Over the past 2 weeks, the world witnessed a horrific tragedy in Kashmir, the Pahalgam terrorist attack, where 26 Hindu terrorists were systematically targeted and killed by Islamist terrorists. Yet, the legacy media's coverage of this event has been a masterclass in narrative distortion, from sanitized language to erasure of religious persecution. The reporting reveals systemic biases that obscure the truth, manipulate public perception, and embolden terrorism. I'll unpack 3 of these biases and their dangerous implications. First is language bias. Major outlets like the New York Times and BBC consistently replace terrorist with militant or gunman in headlines and reports. For example, the New York Times described the attack as, quote, tourists gunned down by militants, framing a calculated Islamist terror attack as a generic shooting. This isn't unique to coverage in India. After the Hamas attacks on Israel, the BBC's World Affairs editor defended not calling Hamas a terrorist group, claiming it's not BBC's job to label the good guys or the bad guys. Yet, the BBC has no issue referring to extremist Hindu movements or extreme Hindu nationalists. They're not too concerned about leading the reader there. This selective language, shapes perceptions and downplays terrorism. Groups like Hamas and Lashkar-e-Taiba are officially designated as terrorist organizations by the US, the UK, the European Union, and even in Lashkar-e-Taiba's case, by Pakistan itself, in spite of its complicity in supporting that and other terror groups. Using objective, official designations matter. Language shapes perception, and avoiding terms like terrorism downplays the threat that these groups pose to global peace and security. Second is erasure of religious persecution. Media outlets have largely omitted the fact that the victims were targeted for being Hindu. Survivors reported the attackers' verified religion by checking IDs, demanding recitations from the Quran, or even inspecting for circumcision. While AP News briefly mentioned targeted killings of Hindus, most coverage, including the Al Jazeera and CNN, avoided highlighting the sectarian nature of the attack. Instead, the only mention of Hindu was a critical reference to Prime Minister Modi's party. This pattern mirrors decades of language bias and erasure around the ethnic cleansing of Kashmiri Pandits in the 1990s, and it continually fuels a vicious citation loop between media, academia, and policymakers. Narratives pushed by scholar-driven activism framing India as a settler colonial presence in Kashmir, ignoring centuries-long cleansing of indigenous Hindus, is a prime example. Hindu and Indian Americans seeking words of condemnation or sanctions against Pakistan from their elected representatives are met with Pakistani talking points. By divorcing the attack from its sectarian nature, legacy outlets erase the continued persecution of Hindus in Kashmir from the historical record. Third are the false equivalencies between Pakistan and India. The BBC, in reporting on Pakistan suspending visas for Indians after the attack, used similar euphemisms and implied a tit-for-tat dynamic. And while the Washington Post noted India's accusations against Pakistan, outlets like CNN and BBC framed the conflict as a bilateral dispute, ignoring Pakistan's documented support for groups like Lashkar-e-Taiba and its history of cross-border proxy wars. Reuters mentioned the Kashmir Resistance Group, but omitted its ties to Lashkar-e-Taiba and Pakistan's ISI. Coverage of India's 2019 abrogation of Article 370, which revoked Kashmir's autonomy, is also framed as a heavy-handed Hindu graphics, failing to contextualize the timing of the attack as an attempt to disrupt actual democratic and developmental progress. By omitting context, editorializing, and drawing false equivalencies, the media absolves Pakistan of accountability and ignores India's legitimate security concerns and the rights of displaced Hindus. The Pahalgam attack wasn't just a tragedy, it was a test of journalistic integrity. And so far, the legacy media has failed that test. Language, omission, and false equivalence distort reality, obscure accountability, and ultimately embolden those who perpetrate terror. We must demand better, honest reporting that confronts uncomfortable truths and recognizes the real victims and perpetrators. I'd also like to share just a personal note from Dr. Rajiv Pandit, a Kashmiri Hindu and a board member of the Hindu American Foundation, who deeply regrets that he couldn't join us here today. Dr. Pandit, a Kashmiri Hindu, was scheduled to travel to Kashmir when the Pahalgam attack occurred. His visit intended to help safeguard and restore the ancient Hindu shrines that hold profound historical and religious meaning, many of which are under threat or already destroyed. The attack disrupted not only lives, but also critical efforts to protect the vanishing Hindu heritage heritage of Kashmir. Dr. Pandit asks all of us to recognize that defending human life and cultural identity must remain central to how we understand and respond to this crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Suhag, for highlighting an extremely important aspect of terrorism. It is not just physical erasure of people and taking their lives. It's also the erasure of their stories and silencing of their voices to tell their stories. Our next speaker is Nikunj Trivedi from Coalition of Hindus of North America. Please come to the floor.
Thank you and namaste. We are here today for a somber occasion. I don't want to say I'm glad to be here, but I'm glad to be in the company of people who have been fighting actively for this cause. And today we are here united to speak against hate and terror. As we think of the role of state actors and proxy institutions in peddling Hindu phobia and anti-Hindu sentiment to undermine civil and human rights, I will focus on institutions and individuals in the US, both academic and non-academic, who play a pivotal role. The Indian American Muslim Council has been an important organization that tries to do significant damage to US-India relations with its often half-baked and highly exaggerated information which portrays Hindus and Hindu Americans as marauders, oppressors, and fascists, even while ignoring attacks by jihadists on Hindus in India. IAMC has also had a history of openly supporting jihadists and Islamists, something that they try to hide carefully but unsuccessfully. For example, IAMC's founding president was associated with the Islamic Circle of North America, or ICNA, and served as the editor of their magazine called The Message, which openly glorified jihadist activities in Kashmir. In 1997, The Message carried an exclusive interview with Syed Salahuddin Ahmed, the supreme commander of Hizbul Mujahideen, who gloated about the jihadist plans in Kashmir. Similarly, in the same year, The Message glorified Jibril Abu Adam, who was born Lawrence Nicholas Thomas, as a shaheed or martyr in the name of jihad in Kashmir. Abu Adam trained at terrorist camps in Pakistan and was killed in a skirmish along with other terrorists who had crossed the Indian border from Pakistan. ICNA also honored him at the 1997 Southeast Regional Convention in Atlanta. IAMC's past conventions have featured a coterie of activists and academics with one goal: to portray Hindus and the Hindu diaspora as Islamophobic, radical, and responsible for social political issues in India and the Indian subcontinent. The 2003 and 2008 conventions also featured Asim Ghafoor as a speaker. Ghafoor was a spokesperson for Global Relief Foundation, which was shut down by the US government in 2001 for links to Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda. The US Treasury Department memo highlighted the charity's role in, I quote, the shipment of material to a terrorist organization operating in the Kashmir region through financial transaction with a Texas-based charitable organization. Ghafoor was also linked to another charity which was exposed for its links to Islamists in 2002 by the Wall Street Journal. In 2014, IAMC's advocacy director Ajit Sahi called ISIS and Hamas as freedom fighters and people's movements who had no choice but to take up arms. He also described ISIS and the Taliban as citizens who were simply shooting the invader who was trespassing their land. Similarly, IAMC's 2005, 2008, 2010, and other events have featured those with a history of anti-Hindu and anti-India activism. More recently, in 2024, IAMC, along with its partners such as the Council for American Islamic Relations, or CARE, Hindus for Human Rights, and others, targeted the famous India Day Parade in New York City, where they accused the organizers of peddling Islamophobia by calling a sacred temple float as an anti-Muslim symbol. And in 2022, the group worked with the Teaneck Democratic Municipal Committee to pass a resolution calling for an FBI investigation into reputed American Hindu organization, an action that was condemned widely by local, state, federal lawmakers from New Jersey. There's already much written about CARE, so I won't go a lot into those details, but suffice to say that CARE was named as an unindicted co-conspirator in the 2008 Holy Land Foundation case, the largest and most sweeping investigation of terrorism financing in the United States. Following the trial, the FBI severed its liaison relationship and suspended formal contacts with CARE, and several states, such as Florida, Arizona, Mississippi, South Carolina, and Texas, have introduced resolutions to suspend or limit contact with CARE. CARE has often allied with IAMC and other organizations to portray Hindus and the Indian government as oppressors and occupiers of Kashmir. In 2019, CARE's DFW chapter partnered with ICNA, Friends of Kashmir, and the Kashmir Unity Forum to protest against, I quote, the Indian occupation of Kashmir. And in 2020, CARE's Philadelphia chapter featured a webinar with Dr. Hafsa Kanjwal, the founder of Stand with Kashmir, an organization known for its pro-Islamist views on Kashmir while whitewashing the brutal genocide of Kashmiri Hindus from the valley. And finally, the role of academics in peddling biased narratives of about Hindus and Kashmir cannot be ignored. Dr. Audrey Trushke, a professor of South Asian history, has been well known for her selective views about Kashmir. For example, her 2021 teaching syllabus featured Professor Hafsa Kanjwal of Stand with Kashmir, along with controversial articles such as Partha Chatterjee's, I quote, in Kashmir, India is witnessing its General Dyer moment, which is a reference to the Indian army, which compares the Indian army to British General Dyer, who killed over 1,000 Indians. Very many people know about Jallianwala Bagh by opening fire on unarmed civilians in 1919. Another article by Professor Goldie Osuri, also featured in Professor Audrey Trushke's class, titled Kashmiris Are Living a Long-Time Nightmare of Indian Colonialism, portrays India as a brutal colonial occupier of Kashmir. The entire section in the syllabus completely ignores Pakistan's role in sponsoring terrorism in Kashmir, the ongoing jihadist activity, along with the genocide of Kashmiri Hindus. Another academic is Professor Aduna Chatterjee of UC Berkeley, who has long advanced the idea that a quote-unquote Hindu-led government of India is the primary problem of the ongoing conflict in Kashmir. She's also the co-convener of the International People's Tribunal or Human Rights and Justice in Indian Administrator Kashmir, IPTK, set up to selectively highlight quote-unquote atrocities by the Indian government in Kashmir. But what's lesser known is that Professor Chatterjee closely collaborated with Ghulam Nabi Fay, who was found guilty in 2011 by the US government to conspiracy and tax violations in connection with a decades-long scheme to conceal the transfer of at least $3.5 million from the United States government, from the government of Pakistan to fund his lobbying efforts in America related to Kashmir. And finally, Hindus for Human Rights, an organization that maintains close ties to the Indian American Muslim Council. While it proclaims to be a Hindu organization, it whitewashes, or at best, ignores the plights of Hindus in Kashmir, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, while going to great extents to portray Hindus as Islamophobic and fascists. Its most recent press release on the terrorist attack in Pahalgam, Kashmir, is a great example. While it briefly condemns the attack, the group quickly whitewashes the massacre and pins the blame on the quote-unquote decades-long atrocities and quote-unquote human rights violations perpetrated by the Indian government without any mention of the fact that the victims who were targeted were specifically Hindus. And I'm just going to read a snippet from their press release. Nothing can justify the violence that unfolded in Pahalgam, but we must understand the conditions that perpetuated. The brutal truth is that this horrific attack, as unjustified as it may be, could not have happened in a vacuum. The Indian government projects an image of quote-unquote normalcy in Kashmir after it stole Kashmiri's right to self-determination by revoking Article 370 in 2019. In reality, every day Kashmiris live in a brutal police state. The Indian military has carried out atrocities for decades with impunity. Kashmiris have long deserved answers for the countless killed and disappeared, as well as reparations for the state of violence that they are subjected to every single day. Kashmir remains a region filled with grief, unresolved injustices, and generational trauma. These can only be addressed through open dialogue, justice, and dignity for all. Remember, this is a press release condemning the Pahalgam terrorist attack. Now, if you are going to condemn a terrorist attack by a long, drawn-out explanation about why this is going on and that is going on and this and that and everything else, but condemning the terrorist attack. But this is called Hindus for Human Rights. Okay? So in conclusion, the above barely scratches the surface how a network of institutions, academics, and activists work overtime to serve as proxies of state actors and peddle a dangerously Hindu-phobic narrative about Hindu Americans and Hindus in India. So I advise all of us to be very cautious of the names of the organizations, but they are only a part of the global machinery that works overtime to undermine the interests of the Hindu community globally. Thank you and namaste.
Thank you, Nikunj, for sharing with us insights into how the mechanism of Islamist propaganda works within American society and permeates through the hallowed halls of academia to embolden and provide a free pass to terrorism. So to round up for today, I'm inviting our Executive Director of Hindu Action, Utsav Chakrabarti, to share his final thoughts.
Firstly, I would like to thank everybody who came here. Thank you very much for coming. This was not an occasion which was happy or joyful, but it is important that we are together here from different Hindu organizations from across the country, from multi-faith, Sikh, Christian, Jewish backgrounds, standing together against terrorism. We all have discussed a lot of things today, many of which go back to the 1500 years of the history of humankind that has not been that kind to some of us. Many of us have discussed the threat of terrorism, the expansion of geopolitical support that many terrorist groups get. I would like to conclude today with some suggestions, and I hope that everybody who is listening, including members of Congress and staffers, would pay heed to this, because this is not just about the victims we see here today, who are no more with us in India. This is about each one of us, everybody who is in America. To start, a concurrent resolution in the House and the Senate must be passed calling for Pakistan to be declared a state sponsor of terrorism.
Yay!
A multilateral agency funding that goes to Pakistan either through IMF or the World Bank has to be stopped. And Pakistani state actors, including the ISI, have to be included by the State Department as state actors of supporting terrorism. Over the past 5 years, 2020 to 2024, the United States has provided Pakistan with an estimated $2 billion in foreign assistance, encompassing both civilian and humanitarian aid. That has to stop. Our tax dollars should not be funding Islamic terrorism. In addition, in the year 2022, $450 million worth of F-16 sustainment package, so repair parts for F-16 fighters, were given to Pakistan. Additionally, approximately $146 million worth of defense equipment under the FMS program were given in the year 2020. Why are we funding our enemies that take us down? This has to stop. All this while, Pakistan has been a steadfast strategic partner of China, and as late as last week, after the Pahalgam terror attacks, China has publicly pledged to support Pakistan under all circumstances. Why are we still supporting Pakistan? We must not use our tax dollars and our technological abilities to sustain and promote a terrorist state and the jihadists it supports globally. We all know in the last 25 years what the consequences of that are. Let's learn from history and not repeat it. Thank you.
to give a couple of notes. Before we disperse, we would like to have a group picture. We do have Crystal Hall, who has been able to join us.
Is something that I think India needs to strengthen. And Kashmir has to come into the limelight, not just a CNN article, not just coverage for 2 or 3 days because an attack happened, but a real, actual, deliberate, long-term plan of how we're going to tackle this and mitigate it and make sure that this is long-term and sustainable. The attack happened while U.S. Vice President Vance was traveling around India. He was visiting, and I think that hopefully resonated with the administration. I'm hoping that this is a bipartisan issue. This is not Democrat or Republican, but this is something that is really in the fabric and the DNA of where the U.S. stands, that we will not tolerate terrorist attacks. Hindus have been targeting Kashmir, obviously, throughout history. It's a problem that doesn't seem to go away. And Pakistan's support for cross-border terrorism is unacceptable. I'll share a brief anecdote. About 23 years ago, I was an intern on Capitol Hill. So I was giving tours of, like the rotunda. And I stumbled upon what was called Kashmir Heritage Week. So there was a huge room where they had photos and messaging all about Kashmir. And this is where all the members of Congress and the senators would come and educate themselves on what Kashmir is, the conflict, what happened. But I did notice that it was all Pakistani propaganda. They used Azad Kashmir, and I was quite upset. I was 19, and I had obviously no power. But I did go to the organizer, whose name was Ghulam Nabi Fai, and I set a meeting with him. And I went to his office, and I said, "Why are you spewing all of these lies?" And he fought with me. He claimed it was all truthful, and then a week later, he got arrested and was being funded by the Lashkar-e-Taiba for a decade. But that decade worth of damage was done. He had been putting this Kashmir Heritage Week on for 10 years. And he was a very strong lobbyist on the Kashmir issue, him and several others that were in his camp. And I think the tragedy there was that there weren't enough Kashmiri Hindu Pandit voices to counter that. So we're now fighting with a lot of misinformation and propaganda that has been cemented into Congress for more than 20 years. And I think the time is now to take an active voice, not just in our circles, drinking kava and complaining about what's happening, but to actually come and to say it here, to actually band together, to put a bill forward, to be advocates of this issue. And that starts with clearing the misinformation and making sure that our voices are heard, because that's where it starts. And you would be surprised if you pulled a random member just in the hallway and you asked about Kashmir, most of them have absolutely no idea. And if they do, again, a lot of it is kind of misinformed. You can get this Pakistani undertone leaning there. And that's because, again, that's the rhetoric that they've heard for so long, which is really unfortunate. So at that time I was an intern, but I told them that one day I will no longer be an intern, and I will make sure I stand up against them. And I want to end with a little bit of Kashmiri, so bear with me. I don't speak very well, and I don't have a great accent, but Butch's Crystal Call, Tamichu Bardak Banyan, Hindu Ben Debayo Katleamo. Butch's Dua Karan, Soin Kashir Pandit, Ben Debayo, Hekin Vapas, Kashir, Hafazit, San Gesit. Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal, for your message and making some time to join our gathering here. So as I mentioned, I would like to invite our speakers and our guests to come to the front so that we can take a group picture in remembrance of the messages that we shared, to speak up forcefully and unitedly against terrorism in all forms. So please. We do have a representative from Raja Krishnamurthy's office, And we would like to give her a minute to share a message from
Join
Russia.
with us if you don't mind.
Later, yeah. Why don't you go ahead? On the other side.
It's okay, it's okay.
All right, cool.
We've been running around all day, and so we haven't been able to get the congressman here, but he wanted to make sure that I came here just to share his best with you all, and to know that you always have a friend in Congress here with him, and you have a very important cause. So thank you all very much, and I just wanted to be able to come and say hi to everybody.
Thank you for doing a good job.
Thank you very much.
We appreciate it.
Of
We
course.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Would you like to be with us? If you don't mind.
Thank you, everybody. If anybody would like to give some